today we want to look at the topic on connection. And this series, which will be this Sunday, next Sunday, and the Sunday after, basically it's for people who are married and they're in relationships, for singles who are not even looking, but actually have significant other relationships that they would want to nurture and pursue. It's also for singles who probably may be seeking to get into a relationship. And then this is also for people who are parenting as well, because there are significant relationships there. It's for people who are courting. It's for people who are separated. It's for people who are divorced as well. And maybe they're in a situation where maybe they're in another relationship, or they are seeking to be in another relationship, but they want to be very careful about the steps that they take. Let me say that this series for me has come from a place of brokenness. It's not a place of sitting, on a pedestal, but it's a place where I have found myself divorced, and I have looked and asked myself, what happened? I have looked and asked myself, what could have been done differently, or what can be done differently? So it's in the space of searching, it's in the space of going back to really look at things and situations that I have come up with this model, which I have felt in significant relationships, this would be very important. I call it a CE model, where there are 3 C's, but for every C, there's an E that connects the C. And the 3 C's are connection and embrace, compatibility and explore, and then commitment and execute. Okay? Now, today we'll be looking at the first C, which is connection. My PowerPoint presentations are through the courtesy of my daughter, Neema, and I really appreciate that. So connection, today we'll look at connection, and then we'll look at the other C's progressively in the next Sundays. Now, with the first C, is basically needing to know, who am I? Okay? And probably before we get into who am I, it's important to know, what does connection mean? Connection is the energy that is created between people when they feel or they are seen, heard, and valued, and when they can give and receive without judgment. That is connection. That's when one says, I feel connected. There's just chemistry, there's just something that brings you together. And we want to see, what is it about this connection? But our first place has to do with who I am. Okay? Who am I? Where do we find our first identity? Where do we find the real answer to who am I? And our first place has to do with creation. God. God created us. We first and foremost belong to God. We are created for Him to fulfill His purposes. That is our first identity of who I am. It's our first identity of connection from the Creator. And sometimes we tend to think that maybe the reasons why God created us is because He was lonely, or because He didn't have much to do. God without us is complete. God without even what we do to participate with Him, He's complete. And so He really doesn't need us, but He made a decision to create us. And God created us because He's love. And God wanted us to participate and share in His love with us. Okay? And God created us to fulfill His eternal plan. And there's just so much that we could write about God's eternal plan and His reason why He created us. But very specific to the topics that we are going to cover, I want to focus on 3 reasons of that creation. One is because God wanted us to love him. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. That is Deuteronomy 6:5. God created us so that we could love him. That was the first reason of creation. And like I said, there are so many others, but I'll specifically focus on this. Then the second one is to love your neighbor as you love yourself. So the first one, we connect with God. The second one, we are connecting with our neighbors in the umbrella of love. That is in Matthew 22:39. And then number 3, we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Ephesians 2:10. And if you look at the theme around the reason for God's creation, as I picked those ones, is love. God wanted us to connect with him with love and to connect with others because of love. Okay? Then the other thing that we want to look at is after God created us, and that is my first identity, my connection with Christ. Then I also need to know, who am I in as far as self-management is concerned? What is it that makes me me? And we're going to look at connection from 6 levels, where we look at the 6 senses that God has given us. Okay? God has given us 6 senses, and it's a way in which we need to connect. Now, before I can connect with someone else, I need to be able to connect with myself. So first, myself in Christ, and then with the person that God has created me. If I do not know who I am, if I'm not in connection with the person that I am, it's going to be very difficult to connect with someone else. So when we talk of self-management, basically we are looking at 6 senses. Which are our 6 senses? Smell, touch, sight, hearing, yes, taste, touch was said. And the 6th one, intuition, our 6th sense. We always talk about what's your 6th sense, what's your intuition, what's your gut feeling. Maybe the men can identify more with a gut feeling, the female probably more the intuition, but that's our 6th sense. So who am I in as far as connection is concerned? Who am I with my 6 senses? And we will use those 6 senses for ourselves. So let's look at, they are not in any order, but we'll look at them the way they appear. Okay? And we need to look at connection in terms of, what do I see? How do I see myself? What's my perception of me? Who do I see myself to be? Do I see myself as a creation from God and of God? Or who do I see myself to be? We have different ways in which we are defined in terms of who we are. We have our own upbringing, our backgrounds coming from our parents. My name is so-and-so, daughter of, or son of. That's an identity. Who do you see yourself to be other than a child of God? Again, as we grow up, we have peers. We tend to identify ourselves also with peers. So you are who you stick around. So if you have a positive peer group, then that's how you see yourself positively. If you identify yourself with a peer group that is not positive, that's how you see yourself. So how do I see myself? Okay? Other than that, in terms of using sight, what do I expose myself to? In terms of reading, in terms of watching, what do I expose myself to? Whatever it is that I expose myself to, that defines who I am as a person. Because then I'm connecting myself with whatever it is that I am watching, or whatever it is that I'm exposing myself to. And I'll be very relevant. if I'm exposing myself to pornography, for example, that is going to affect my connection, because I will see myself in a certain way. If I'm exposing myself to reading God's word and to reading literature that is actually helping me as I visualize things that are helpful and useful, and may not necessarily be spiritual per se, but things that are building me up, that is defining me, because that's a connection that I'm establishing. Then we have hearing. What am I listening to? What am I allowing myself to take in? You know, with technology, I mean, one of the things I'm hands down about is technology. You know, and I have given up Mulika that I would ever catch up with any generation in as far as technology is concerned, because they will always be ahead. But I think with technology, and as things get even tougher in as far as what we are getting, you know, to ourselves, technology becomes, you know, a challenge. Where even when I'm listening to earphones, I think that's a common thing in every household or with anyone. We are busy listening to whatever someone else cannot hear what it is that we are listening to. It's between me and myself. But how am I using my ears? What am I hearing? What am I exposing myself to? Because whatever it is, I'm exposing and connecting myself and identifying myself with whatever it is that I'm listening to, that even someone else may not be hearing. And then the people we surround ourselves with also, they say certain things that we listen to, and we hear and we internalize them, and we can connect ourselves with them, and that affects the person that I am. Okay? And then we have the next one, touch. Okay? When we talk about touch, who are my friends? Okay? Who are the people who are making me feel encouraged, comforted? Or even when we use the words, I feel you. What does that mean? Who is that person who is actually coming my way and being there? Touch comes from very basic. And when we talk about basic, we're talking about childhood connection. We're talking about that little baby and the parent who is connecting with them. When you touch that child, there's a connection that happens. When your friend touches you, there's a connection that happens. When you are bereaved and someone taps on my shoulder or holds me, there's a connection that happens where I feel they actually can feel me. So when it comes to touch, who and what am I exposing myself to so that I can say I'm feeling connected with this person? All right? And how do they treat me? Then the next one, taste. When we talk about taste, we're using the symbol of the tongue to say the things that come through my tongue actually identify the person that I am. The things that I say, either about myself, especially, those are things that connect me. What do I think of myself? What do I say about myself? When I identify myself and say, this is my name, I'm identifying myself with someone. When I say I am a born-again Christian, I am identifying myself with Christ. Those are things that I'm saying about myself. Okay? Then the next one, smell, sense. Okay? When we talk of sense, you know, there are things that we can say. How do you smell someone? How would you use the sense of smell to identify yourself? How would you use that? Some thoughts? There are some great thoughts right here. Thoughts right there? Uh-huh. Something that smells fishy. Yeah? And by the way, that is not far-fetched. Tell us more about that. What do you mean by that? Your name? Susan. Okay, Susan, tell us. When you talk about something that smells fishy, what does that mean to you? In practical terms. And in what context can you identify with that? It's okay, it's okay. There are no right and wrong answers, by the way. Yes.
In layman's language, when you say something smells fishy, I think it's connected to the other senses, because you'll feel that something is not straight. Yeah, so you just say, that smells very fishy. Yeah, or maybe about a situation that doesn't look like what you are maybe hoping for. Yeah, yeah. Don't know exactly how to explain that.
Thank you, Susan. That is true. Anyone else who would like to give it another shot? Yes. In fact, I was going to ask, what's the male perspective?
I think it means suspicion. Yeah, you're suspicious about something. Yeah, it's not working right, it's not ideal or conventional.
Okay. Thank you. Do you see male-female differences? Susan is trying to gather words and saying this is what it is, and it just says it's something that is fishy. End of story. Yeah? But both are actually right. Because, we use those expressions and we say, there's something that's smelling fishy, or I smell a rat. Those are words that we use. And it's basically to say, I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm suspicious about this situation. I am not sure about this situation. And that's how we can use scent, all right? But even scent, we can use it even directly. There are times where you can smell and tell, that doesn't smell nice. Something is awful. That thing is rotten. Or that thing, whatever it is not right. And there are also direct ways of looking at smell, okay? Then we have the next one, which is our intuition or our gut feeling. This is, again, where we can say, without even using one sense, all in all, it's where you say, I'm feeling uncomfortable. And when you ask someone, can you give me the facts? Then they will tell you, I don't know, but I just feel there's just something not right about it. And then they will ask, is it something you can see? Is it because it's something you can touch? I.e., they're asking for the facts. And you're like, no, but I just feel it is not right. And that's our gut feeling. So the first place of connection, we said, is in understanding who I am. And in understanding who I am, I'm first connected with God, and then self-management or self-awareness, where I can look at my 6 senses and be able to know, as far as I'm concerned, this is who I am, because I'm using my 6 senses. And then I'd like us to look at the next way of connection, which is important, and that has to do with others, okay? So when we talk of connection, we are talking about others. Let me tell you where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a place of view where I'm saying, when we have connection as our first place, we embrace someone. And then we move to the issue of compatibility, and we explore certain things. And then we move to the place of commitment. When it comes to others, what has happened is that a lot of times we will say, I feel connected to this person. And then very quickly we move to commitment, where commitment is marriage. Simply because you're feeling, I have a strong connection. If we looked at the previous slide, that one, do those guys look connected? Do they look connected? Now, from the first slide, what do you think is connecting them? As you look at the slide, what's the connection? What's the connection in the first slide? What's the connection? Is it touch? Physical? Touch? And the second one? What's the second one? What was that? Please share the joke. What was that? Yeah, and that's possible, isn't it? Perfume, possibly, yeah? That perfume smells, And so I'm feeling connected with that person. What else can you see? Touch, sight, eye contact, isn't it? Yeah? And you can sense that there's a deeper connection. Do you think there would be a sixth sense there? Do you think there's a sixth sense? Yeah? There's something about you, yeah, that makes you feel connected to the person, isn't it? Now, if we keep that on and look at it, then the point is, from the first slide, which is physical, that's using one sense, isn't it? The sense of touch. And it's very easy to say, the way this guy carries me, or the way this chick allows me to carry them, I feel connected. And therefore, it is enough for us to commit. Are we together? And the question is that enough to sustain a commitment? Do you hear where the no's are coming from? People who are older. And it is so clear to them, they are not even thinking it's the one of no. Yeah? And I would join them. And the reason is because through the years in marriage, you get to know there is more to commitment than just physical. Let me talk about another level of physical. Physical sexual. Where because of our sexual connection, then we think that is strong enough to take us to commitment. And again, I share this from the counseling room, where you can have people coming and saying, the way we connect sexually, and they think that is enough to sustain a commitment. You could have pregnancy because of sex. And one says, because I'm pregnant, then we have no choice but to commit. Will that sustain? It will not sustain, all right? Then we look at the second connection. And maybe we say, eye contact is what I see. And I don't know what are the big things for the girls. What is it that you see in the guys that makes you feel, I feel him? What's that? What do you see? There was someone saying something there. What's that? Six-pack. Yeah? Six-pack. And I think that's true, isn't it? One pack. That's enough. I don't think it will be enough for the young girls. It has to be 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for them to say yes. You know? So 6-pack. What else? What else would you be looking for? Good conversation. What does good conversation mean? He does all the talking. Good conversation where he does all the talking. Is that true? No. What's that?
Well, I wouldn't really want him to talk, do all the talking. It should be something that, when he challenges me, we talk about different things, and both of us are like, oh, you also think so, It's something that you connect through conversation. Yes. Okay.
So connecting through conversation, okay? Where you talk and you feel like, yeah. The way you say things, your perception, your intellectual level, I just feel, yeah, we're on the same page. What would the guys look for? Yes. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So he's saying depending on the age. At 24, you look at beauty, which is physical. At 26, you look at brains and the future. So did a 24-year-old have brains or not? What have you just said to these young girls? Yes. This is important because we want to know our girls have brains.
Okay, I didn't really mean that way. Basing on me then, 24, you'll really look at beauty and the talk of town. But when you grow older, get to 25, you start looking at how are you going to communicate with this girl. Basically, you start leaning towards what's the content of your talk. Yeah.
So when you look for beauty for a 24 and below, it sounds to me that you're not looking for someone to actually marry. Or the man at 24. Oh, so the man at 24 is looking at beauty when he's 24 and below. But when he's 26 and above, he begins to look at the future. So what happens to the girls he's been relating with or looking at when he was below 24? Why was he in relationships?
Beauty is so superficial, but brains will remain and they'll be passed on to your children and in the future.
Just look at the way those girls are looking. Sad. Let me ask you, will that sustain a commitment? Will that sustain a commitment? And what I mean with that sustain a commitment is, let's say, for example, and I think what he's saying is not far-fetched. It isn't. Because he's talking about himself as a male. At a certain age, I begin to look at life more seriously. And when I get into a relationship, I have an intention of the future. But below a certain age, that's not really what I'm looking for. Now, let's look at a situation where a girl probably gets pregnant with a man who is 24 and below. Are they likely to go anywhere? Even if there was commitment that was forced, is there likely to be sustainability? Is there? No. Okay? And basically what we are saying is, in connection, we need to be able to use different senses. I can't use my seeing and saying, whoa, this guy looks so handsome, or this chick looks so beautiful. The next thing is commitment. Neither can I say that I'm rushing to get physically intimate. First of all, we have our standards that God has for us. But in a situation, even where there is sexual relationship or even pregnancy, that is not enough to take you to a place of commitment because of that. 6 packs won't keep. And the reason I say this is because there was something that was said about 1 pack. When does the 1 pack come? When does it come? Mulika says when Regina began feeding him. Yeah? So that's when a one pack begins to come. All right? So what happens if that was your reason for commitment? Then we talk about scents. All right? Perfume. Sometimes we are caught up with issues of perfume. And we think this is good enough. You know, when I'm with this guy, when I'm with this chick, this takes me to another level. And you begin to move to a place of commitment. Now, let me bring it home and say we need to use all our 6 senses. Where do we use them? If we could move to the slide of many people. Okay? Okay, right here. We're saying your first place of connection, or your second, let's say your third place, because your first one is who you are in Christ, and then knowing who you are. Then the other place is with people. Socialize. Before you specialize, socialize. Have a pool of people whom you are interacting with. And while you interact with them, use your 6 senses to decide who you're going to embrace. When we talk about 6 senses, make sure you're using the 6. Ask yourself, what do I see in this person? There's one lady who told me, Mary, I have found a guy that I like, but I can't stand looking at him. Can you imagine? And it's not hearsay. Somebody said, I want to get married to this guy, but I can't stand his face. And I said, what are you doing with them? Because you're using them. Because the guy comes to pick me up. You're using the guy. And it's not right. It is not right. If you can't stand their face, then leave them and be on your own. Yeah? Then we have other situations where one says, you know, when we were relating, the way this guy or this lady treated me, I smelt a rat. But I ignored it. Does that sound familiar? And we ignore that, where you can say, I smelt a rat. Because of A, B, C, and D. But I ignored it. Why did I ignore it? Because he or she looked great. We used only one sense to make a decision to commitment. Talking about intuition, I could tell there was just something not right about this person. I didn't know what it was, but I could tell there was something that was not right about them. I was told, but I didn't listen. Why? Because they looked great. Because the things that they told me persuaded me that they were good. Because you only used 1 or 2 senses. Words that you heard, your ears, and words that were used by the tongue. And you made a decision to commitment. If we can talk about words, one of the things that we have is charm. There are guys who are, and ladies who are very charming. We don't need to go far. I mean, guys are really warned about the woman who drips. Mulika, how does it go? Yeah, drips with honey. Her tongue, yeah, in the book of Proverbs, when there is warning, my son, do not. And a lot has to do with what she says. And it also has to do with fragrance, isn't it? And the reason there is warning about that is because those influence, especially the men, the fragrance and all that. And you're told, my son, do not go near. Don't. Yeah? And you will see her beckoning you and telling you, come. Come. And what is she using? Senses. What will be appealing and get you down. The same thing for the ladies with the guys. Guys can be very charming, where a guy can promise you heaven and he can say the right words. What is a woman looking for? Safety and security. And he will carry her. And he will treat her very well. And he will tell her, I will take care of you. Does he deliver? When it comes to commitment, you may find it's not there. Connection. As you socialize in a pool of people, then at least I'm able to look at Joseph, I can look at David, I can look at Njoroge, I can look at Owino, I can look at Musau, I can look at whoever else. Because I'm socializing in a pool. And I have the place where I can make a choice and a decision without very quickly moving into specializing. Now it's out of that pool that now you can make a choice because you have used your 6 senses and decide out of these 5 guys, when I sit down and evaluate, I think Joseph seems to be the better one. But remember, that is the first stage. That is not enough to take you to commitment. We have compatibility and we have commitment. And even commitment has its stages. So if I feel we have that connection, then I can embrace. So if he tells me, would you consider? Then I would say, yeah. Would you consider marrying me? I would say, wait. Because how did we get to marriage? How have we gotten into marriage? We need to know each other a bit more. These days we have, websites like eHarmony. We have others where people are connecting and finding each other through web pages. And what happens is that someone fills up and they are looking, and this is what they are looking for, and you're matched up. And then what happens is you meet. So people decide we are going to meet, and then they meet. When they meet, that's the first contact. And it's easy to hear people say, we are planning for a wedding next year. Who is this person? How do you know them? That's even harder because you didn't even get them from your pool of socializing. Because at least the people you are socializing with and you're hanging out with as a group, you have watched and you've observed them. But the one that you're meeting for the very first time and very quickly moving to a place of commitment, you're likely to have challenges. Because there are many variables. Yeah? We can go back and say, but there are people who have connected and their commitment has weathered, and yet there was matchmaking in the olden days where you are told this is the person and off you go. I think there were a number of variables. So things are not as straight as they used to be. What choice did they have? What options did they have? In the place that things didn't work, people stuck in the relationships. Let me give you an example. If you look at, I don't know whether I would say, if you look at your parents, because probably your parents might be a bit younger, but maybe your grandparents, as for some of us, is your parents. There are things that our parents, when I look back, I think they did very well. And I think my mom there would be a good example, in terms of age. Now, what happened is that you found the woman stayed in the relationship for the sake of the children. That was not a bad thing. And I think it's the reason that most of us are where they are. Because mom, irrespective of what happened, stayed in the relationship for the sake of the kids. Even when the kids are saying, it's how? So she took the beating, she took the unfaithfulness, she took all the in-law manenos for the sake of the children. And I think there's a place for that. The only place where I have a challenge with that is when the kids leave. There's a new trend that has happened. So mama will tell mzee, you know, there was that age when kids went out of the country. Yeah? And so mama will tell mzee, umezaliwa. Let me go, nishike mtoto. Will mzee say no? He will bless her and say, please go. Si amezaliwa. Does she come back? She doesn't come back. Because she was in the marriage for the sake of and not for the relationship. If she's not gone out of the country and stayed there and probably found a mzungu, yeah, she's here, but she's in the chama all the time. Or she's visiting her in-laws and staying with them. Where is mzee? He's here at home. With who? Alone. And the kids are asking, Mom, and that generation never spoke. And so you sit and ask, what happened? Okay? And the idea is that the reason we are looking at these levels is because as much as possible, and I think it is possible, as much as possible, we want to avoid the situation where the commitment is not working. Let me tell you the people who are paying the price. These are the people who are paying the price. It's the kids that pay the price, irrespective of the reason for it. Because we are not saying someone who is being beaten in a marriage to the place where they are almost dying, their safety is important, isn't it? And that may mean a marriage is terminated, or where there is unfaithfulness, that may mean. But that does not reduce the impact on the kids. It doesn't. So we want to raise, God helping us, a generation of kids who are not paying the price because of decisions that we have made that are very costly. And so that's why we are looking at the different stages. We are saying, in connection, take your time. Once you embrace this person, in my opinion, I'll call this my opinion, stay 1 year. Where you have decided from this pool we've been socializing for at least not less than 6 to 1 year in a pool of different people. If I'm going to specialize, then once I embrace this person and they are special to me, let's give it 1 year. 1 year again to use my 6 senses, just observing and seeing what kind of a person do I have. Listen, if you have issues with any of the 6 senses in a significant way in that 1 year, quit. Leave it. Leave it. Leave it because it's the commitment we want to sustain. Because that honors God and is the right thing to do. Okay? Now, let me also say, we're not looking for Miss Perfect and Mr. Perfect. That's not what we are looking for because they don't exist. We are all in the workmanship of God, helping us to become more like Christ by the day. And this is what then I have to say. if you've gotten someone to embrace, before actually you embrace them, please introduce this person you're thinking of to others. And say, check her out. I've not said anything, but I can tell we have a connection. Ask your peer, ask a mentor, and ask a couple that's older. Tell them to assess this person for you using the 6 senses. The reason we are not living to yourself is because you know how love is, you know how things of the heart are. You can't rely on them. So you need a voice of reason from others. And a quick way of evaluating this, I would say, give a score of each sense out of 10. How does that guy look? A score out of 10. How about the words they say? Our girls are really in abusive relationships. The things I'm hearing this guy telling me verbally. But also, our boys are in abusive relationships. What am I hearing this girl telling me? Actually, in the counseling room these days, we no longer deal, even though that's majority, that he hit me, the ladies are saying, I can't take it lying down. When they come, they say, we fought. We fought. Yeah? Because I can't take it lying down. A guy comes and he's not just saying, it's no longer she was unfaithful to me. I mean, he was unfaithful to me, is she. That's what we are dealing with. Evaluate those things. Then ask your peers who know you very well and who have seen and watched this person in your life to also give a score out of 10 for each of the 6 senses. Ask the couple that's older to give a score as well. Now, if your score on average is less than 5, leave it. Leave it. It's not worth it. It won't work. And it's early enough to leave it and go back to socialize. The higher the score, the better. So if you get a 6, it's better than a 5. But we are also saying that does not end once you embrace. After you embrace, in that 1 year, continue to evaluate. Because, let me tell you, time will tell. Time will tell. Let me end with this one example. You know, with changes here and there. Once somebody walked in and said, if we've known each other for 1 year, we were in relationship, and then we moved to compatibility for 2 years, we engaged for 1 year. How many years are those? How many years are those? 1 year, 2 years, 1 year. 4 years. And at the place of commitment, for them it was, I want to quit. I want to quit. And then I shared the model, because I said this model is also for people who are married, to ask, where do you think? Let's go back to the drawing board. Where did we lose it? Because even if you lost it in marriage, there's still hope. You can still go back and work out things that need to be worked. But you know what it turned out? It turned out that the 1 year was actually 6 weeks. The 1 year of connection was 6 weeks because the guy was out of the country. The 2 years of compatibility amounted to 7 months. And the 1 year of engagement amounted to 1 week. Because he just flew in, got engaged, went back. Came back, wedding happened. So in total, they knew each other for 4 years. And they were together for 4 years. But really? Can you see? Because it's time. It's what I see. It's what I hear. It's the words I hear outside of the phone, outside of WhatsApp. It's my intuition. It's people who can see who I am relating with and give me feedback. And let me tell you, when you buy time, I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, because it can't be perfect. Marriages at the level of commitment have their challenges, but they are more manageable. Because your connection and your foundation has been done well. Let's do this. I don't know whether this is allowed, but let me ask you, please remove your phones. If you have a phone, get it out. If you don't have a phone, a piece of paper. Okay? This is what I want to ask you to do between now and next Sunday. If you're in a marriage, if you're in a relationship courting, if there's someone you're eyeing, yeah, whether you're divorced, separated, or whatever it is, or single, if you're not in any of those categories, but possibly there's a significant other relationship that is important to you, what I'd like you to do, I want you to think about the person who is significant to you, you're in a relationship with. Either you're eyeing them, or you're courting, or maybe you're already married to them. Okay? And what I would like you to do is give them a score in the 6 senses. If you're seated next to your spouse, I'm hearing you move. Yeah? But I think it's a good opportunity to discuss, even if you're seated next to them, isn't it? And you can ask, why did you give me a score of 3 in this particular area? Okay? I'd like you to give a score. That's not the end of it. Then I would like you to ask people someone who is either your peer, 1, your peer, 2, your mentor, and 3, a couple. For people who are married, maybe a couple who is older than them is their mentor. Ask them also to give a score, without showing them your score. And then they will give you the score. In your own honesty, add up the score and get an average out of 5, out of 10. If your score is 5 and below and you're married, it's not the end. It just means there are things to work at, so that the commitment can be what God desires. If you're eyeing and your score is less than 5, leave it. Ask for help and support on how to quit. Okay? All right? That's the assignment between now and next Sunday, so that we can evaluate. What's the goal? We want to have a society, we want to have a people who are fulfilling God's purposes and commitment, so that our children may benefit from what God desires of us. Thank you.